is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Shocking police dashcam video shows officers tackling and punching an Indigenous chief in Canada, all for having expired license plates on his car. Alan Adams is the chief of the Athabascan Chippewayan First Nation. He was left beaten and bloodied after being stopped by police in March. He released the videos taken by people who recorded his arrest, in addition to the dashcam video, which was also released last week. The videos drew reaction across the nation, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau weighing in.
Far too many Black Canadians and Indigenous people do not feel safe around police. It's unacceptable. And as governments, we have to change that.
Adams was charged with resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. However, his attorney says the video shows he was the real victim. An initial investigation into the incident by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police found that the officer's actions were, quote, reasonable. This latest beating of an Indigenous person comes after a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer killed an Indigenous man in New Brunswick on June 12th. Also recently, another Indigenous woman died while in police custody. Prime Minister Trudeau says reforms are needed immediately. Two Confederate statues are no longer standing in the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma's capital. They stood in the Capitol Square for nearly a century, yet they were not placed there by the tribe. This weekend, they came down. They are relics from the past when the property was a county courthouse owned by the state. Principal Chief Chuck Hoskins Jr. said it was time for a change. The removal is a step towards reclaiming their narrative. Hoskins Jr. said, quote, "We've suffered for centuries with too many others telling our story for us as they see fit." The monuments were removed in 2 hours and are being stored by the Cherokee Nation. And now for the latest numbers of COVID positive tests in Indian Country, let's go to our Washington editor, Jordan Bennett-Begay. Jordan?
Yate Patty, Yate Shikisto Shidina'en. Over the weekend, we received COVID-19 updates from 4 tribes. Deaths across the Indian Country related to COVID-19 have passed the 400 mark. Here are the latest numbers from our database. There are 10,054 positive confirmed cases and 402 deaths in the Indian health system. Again, that's a total of 10,054 positive confirmed cases and 402 deaths in the Indian health system as of June 15th. In Mississippi, the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians reported 55 new cases and 4 additional deaths. That brings their total to 812 cases and 49 deaths in total. The Colorado River Indian tribes in Arizona saw an increase of 15 cases since we logged the tribe in our database. The tribe has a total of 150 cases. In Arizona also, the White Mountain Apache tribe announced 107 new cases and 1 additional death. They have a total of 1,259 cases and 17 deaths. And again, the tribe has a higher infection rate than the Navajo Nation. And the Navajo Nation that spans across Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Utah is reporting 233 new cases and 13 additional deaths over the weekend. And this gives the tribe a total of 6,611 cases and 311 deaths, Patty.
And we're also hearing the Yakima Nation in Washington has a very high infection rate with a COVID-19 test positive there. So we'll continue to follow the Yakima Nation as well as other tribes across the country. The other part of the story is just telling the story of people who have passed away due to COVID-19. Tell us how we can learn more about those people, Jordan.
Yes, family members and friends can submit. We post obituaries that are submitted to us. They can send them to obituaryindiancountrytoday.com, and we really are trying to put a face to these numbers and tell these individuals' stories, because when they pass away, all their stories and languages and the culture and just who they are in general go with them too. And again, we're just trying our best to capture how this is impacting Indian country, and every person who dies from this, it impacts a whole community in a tribal nation.
So keeping the data, but also keeping those stories of the people who have passed away. Jordan Bennett-Begay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
and we'll be right back.
This is Indian Country Today.
Welcome back. In this election year, there are several Native American candidates who will be on the ballot in November. Ruth Buffalo knows what they are going through right now. She is the first Native American woman to be elected to the North Dakota legislature as a state representative. Buffalo is from the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. She defeated an incumbent and the man who sponsored the controversial voter ID law that many Native Americans felt would disenfranchise their votes. Welcome to our program, Representative Ruth Buffalo.
Matsukidads, thank you for having me.
Now, you have an educational background and a background in public health. You've sponsored about 8 bills since coming into office, and some of them around the issues of missing and murdered Indigenous women and also human trafficking. How did your election raise the awareness of this issue that's been going on for decades?
Well, really, it was what was happening in the local level. In Fargo, we had the tragic, horrific murder of a young Indigenous woman who was 8 months along in her pregnancy. And so a lot of our community members found ourselves on the front lines and offering support and actually taking part in the search for the late Savannah LaFontaine Braywind.
So knowing that background and then bringing it to the issue, and since your election and the election of other Native women across the country, various states are starting to put together task force on missing and murdered Indigenous women. Would you say that's how the landscape is changing with the incoming of Native women, Native people in general, like being elected to office?
Yes, definitely. Representation does matter in every level of government. And so if we are at the table, we are more likely to have increased visibility, and we can raise awareness to certain issues that directly impact Native American communities across North Dakota. But having that representation in every level of government is so important.
And does this tie into your work on the Judiciary Committee?
It does. I was on the Judiciary Committee and the Agriculture Committee in the last legislative session. North Dakota is a little bit different in that we don't meet every year for our legislative session. And so currently we're in an off year, which is referred to as our interim year. So I am on the Interim Judiciary Committee. And yes, all of the bills, 6 of them went through the Judiciary Committee.
All right, so what do you do in this off year?
This off year, our interim committee year, we work on the different bills that might have become studies. And also as a legislator, I'm really in listening mode to the constituents and paying close attention to what's happening on the ground and really wanting to hear from constituents what they would like to see introduced in the next legislative session that will be in January of 2021, which may be remote due to COVID-19. So that's another interesting development. We haven't met yet since early spring for the Interim Judiciary Committee. So we will be reconvening finally next month, and we have the option of going on site to Bismarck, to the state capitol, or logging in remotely from our computers.
Well, certainly the pandemic, this global pandemic, is affecting everything, and elections, just on top of it all. Standing Rock, Turtle Mountain, and Spirit Lake Nation all had record voter turnout in this last election. How do you repeat that this time, and especially in this pandemic?
It's going to be a challenge, but as North Dakotans, we are very resilient. We have withstood lots of harsh weather. We're known for being very gritty and hardworking, and being able to withstand blizzards and very extreme weather conditions. So that kind of plays a part into who we are as a people. And so we know that there's going to be some challenges, but we're up for the challenge and ready to adapt, to the more digital realm that we're in, with digital organizing and trying to do outreach, through Zoom meetings and any means of technology and phone calls. And it's also kind of getting back to the traditional grassroots organizing of having a phone conversation with someone. So there are pluses and minuses, but the huge challenge that we see ahead of us is not really being able to have that door-to-door contact, which was very huge within my 2018 legislative race, was going door to door. That's so important. So we have to make adjustments during these COVID-19 times.
It really is presenting a new set of challenges for anyone campaigning. Yet still, there were several women, Native women, who were successful in their primary election. And so come November, you could have some company in the state legislature. Let's look at those 3 women who are now, who've won their primary in both the House and also the Senate races. Thomasina Mandan.
Yes, Thomasina Mandan is running for District 4 House, and she's lives in Newtown, North Dakota, so which is located on Fort Berthold Indian Reservation. Both Thomasina Mandan Stevens and Lisa Finley DeVille are both MHA citizens and residents of Fort Berthold Indian Reservation. Lisa is running for District 4 Senate, and she is from Mandaree. And so one thing to consider in the political landscape in North Dakota is that within the Democratic Nonpartisan League Party, we do not have a representation west of Bismarck. So one might even say we don't have representation west of the Missouri River in North Dakota, which still, so west of Bismarck is still a very large area of North Dakota. And so we have our work cut out for us, but I believe these women are up for the challenge, and we're looking forward to bringing a much needed upset in November, the November election. On the eastern side of the state is where we have most of our Democratic Nonpartisan League representation coming out of Fargo. And so Tracy Wilkie, who is a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, she is running for House in District 16, and she did very well in the primary. She was trailing the incumbent. So there's 2 incumbents that she's running against in the House, and she was trailing only by 58 votes. So it's definitely within her reach, and so it's exciting to have 3 Native women running for office in this election cycle. The last time that that has actually never happened. The only thing that has come close to having something similar was in 2016 when 3 of us were running in a statewide race, which had never happened before. And so it's great. We're making progress, but long overdue. And so we're excited to see what's to come.
And you ran for office before this last time, and you lost, but you didn't give up. So talk a little bit about that. Now we're looking at, as you mentioned, these historic races where you've got all these candidates running for office. So what happens if they all lose? How do you get back on that horse to ride again?
Yes, I would say, the most important thing is to not give up and to stay involved. After the 2016 election, I had run for insurance commissioner, first time running ever, and it just so happened to be a statewide race. But the day after the election, I remember sitting on my laptop and doing a lot of research and trying to find ways of how can I carry this work forward, because so many people across North Dakota had shared their personal stories with me, and I felt a huge responsibility to do something with that. And so throughout the campaign trail in 2016 across the state of North Dakota, people from all walks of life would share that nobody has ever listened to them before, and they felt like they were being heard. And so to me, that meant so much for people to trust me right away on the campaign trail after meeting me, for the first time. So that's what I hope, that more people will continue to stay involved and learn as much as you can. in trying to help change policy, because we know that through policy, we have an opportunity to improve the quality of life for everybody.
So you have 4 children. How are you raising them to be active voters?
We actually had this conversation just last week. My daughter was making breakfast and she said, just think, next year I get to vote. She's 17. She just turned 17 in January. And she has been, all of them have actually been active throughout this political arena that I've embarked on. Was actually a legislative intern in 2014 for Representative Ponkowi Victors. She's representing Kansas, and she's been in the state legislature for a number of years, since 2011, I believe. And she is really building a strong base of Native and non-Native young people, and giving them an opportunity to shadow her and learn from her. We actually have an former intern of Representative Ponkowi Victors, who is running for state legislature in Kansas, for Lawrence, Kansas. And so it's exciting to see that many of her former interns have actually gone on to law school too. So, you know, it's, so my children have been a part of this process as far back as 2014. I can remember the very first march that my daughter and I did in 2016. It was just the 2 of us holding a banner. She was super nervous and kind of hiding behind the banner. But towards the end of the march, she was doing cartwheels. And actually by the end of the summer of 2016, we became professionals at parades and marches. And we had the Chihuahua and the twins. So it's a really a family effort that this has been, and we hope to continue moving forward. I hope to get reelected in 2022 in my same seat that I hold right now, and I'm thankful for the people in District 27 for electing me to represent them.
Well, you know, that's also part of the conversation is, you know, just grooming that next generation of voters. And we hear so often that we have a large population, Native Americans, who are of voting age, but have not registered. And then the other large population are up and coming voters. So how do you get that message out to participate in this election?
Yes, I mean, I know just from within my household, we have a 17-year-old, 13-year-old, and then 2 5-year-old twins, but the teenagers are very in tune with what's happening across the country today, you know, through access through their phones. They don't have Facebook accounts yet, but they do have Instagram and YouTube. Not their own YouTube channels, but they have access to different people that they follow. And so they're pretty connected to social issues and political issues. And so I know that it's so important for our young people to vote. We know that even with the public health work that we do, that the young voting age is a huge block within our Native population across the country. And so, you know, just trying to encourage our youth to stay involved, that their vote does matter, and that we need them now more than ever to exercise their right to vote. Interesting thing about North Dakota is that we don't require a voter registration, which is twofold. There's pros and cons, but also in trying to track the Native vote in terms of outcomes across the state, it's a little bit challenging to find that information as well, because a lot of our Native Americans live off the reservations. But yet there's lots of work to do, and we have a huge opportunity to shift representation in this upcoming election.
Well, so that's what's happening in North Dakota, and across the country, other states are taking measures. For example, in Nevada, they just established within the Democratic Party this Native American Caucus to help identify Native Americans and help them campaign for office. And they have 27 federally recognized tribes.
Right. Yep. You know, here in North Dakota, we have 5 different tribal nations and areas, you know, that are very close to the reservation. So we have urban areas. Bismarck is the largest urban Native population, and then Fargo. So there's a lot of opportunity to do outreach in these areas. And we know that a lot of our Native youth are engaged in different leadership programs. For example, the North Dakota Indian Youth Leadership Academy. I was an alumni from it when I was in high school, and my daughter is now also alumni. So there's much opportunity there to shift the representation in 2020. And also we know that within the 7 battleground states, they also have such huge Native populations. So we're hopeful. We know we have our work cut out for us, but we're ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work.
So, and also in your state, you had all mail-in ballots this election. And on the surface, mail-in balloting sounds so easy. You just, get your mail and you mark your ballot and you put it back in the mail. But in many parts of Indian country, it's not so easy. Why? Why not?
Right. So due to COVID-19, our governor, he issued an executive order to have vote by mail for the entire state of North Dakota, that has never happened before. But we are still waiting the official results for the election. The June primary was just held last Tuesday. And so we're told that tonight the county canvassing boards will meet to go over official results. And then by this coming Friday, the state canvassing board will meet to go over the official results. So we've been paying close attention to our rural areas. Being a representative in District 27, Fargo, we have, a built environment where it's more accessible for the post office, for mail, and even the drop box there at the Cass County District Court. But we are interested in finding out what the gaps were, and we know that in our rural communities, such as Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, that has 6 different counties that intersect it, that poses a greater challenge for accessibility with mail-in ballots and drop boxes. Within our Firehouse Caucus that took place this past March for the presidential races, our candidates, there was only 1 drop box within Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, and the same for last week's June primary. So that's 1 drop box for 1 million acres of land, which poses an additional challenge. So we're hoping to work out the kinks in time for the November election and do some really strong outreach, especially in our tribal rural communities.
I think you have a future voter making an appearance here. You want to introduce her?
Sure. This is Gil. Say hi.
Hi there. So they're very involved in your life and in what you're doing here, which, modeling that kind of behavior and voting and such is really important for our youth here. But, most of these efforts are being made by the Democratic Party, and yet to pass legislation and to make, laws, you need both parties. How important is it to work across the party aisle?
It's, I would say as an Indigenous woman, it's not that challenging, because as an Indigenous woman, growing up here in North Dakota, we weren't raised particularly to see party lines. It was just, there's good and bad in all people. And so working across party lines really hasn't been too much of a challenge. It's really just finding common ground with our values. And I believe that as an Indigenous woman, you really cannot put us in a particular box. And so we have, it's really based off of our values, and a lot of our Indigenous values, our rural tribal values, are North Dakota values. And so it's been a good experience, so far being in the state legislature. I'm hopeful that we will have more people of diverse backgrounds. We need fresh perspectives in the state legislature. Even as women, we barely make about 21% of the representation in the state legislature. But as you mentioned, we, as Democrat nonpartisan leaguers, there's only 25 of us in the state legislature total out of 144 seats. So working across the aisle is essential to getting legislation passed that will benefit everybody. And a lot of the legislation that I passed was focusing on, safety and protections across North Dakota. And we know that until we until we address the issues that our most vulnerable targeted populations face, then nobody is safe. So we really need to work at a comprehensive lens to find upstream solutions and root causes to the challenges that we face across North Dakota.
All right. Well, Representative Ruth Buffalo from North Dakota, I want to thank you for joining us today on our program. And I ran out of time, couldn't get you to answer a question about coaching, and because you are a former coach, both men and women's basketball. But we'll save that for the next conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, Montserrat odds. Thank you for having me. We appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us and watching. Remember, you take care of yourself. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Tholhungva. Join us again tomorrow.
This is Indian Country Today.